to practice the taqwa of Allah as is the best of provisions. The verse that I chose for today's discussion is from Surah Al-Imran, chapter number 3, verse number 140. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this ayah says, إِن يَمْسَسْكُمْ قَرْضٌ, that if you get hurt, فَقَدْ مَسَّ الْقَوْمُ قَرْضٌ مِثْلُهُ, indeed, certainly, others have also experienced injuries. وَتِلْكَ الْأَيَّامُ نُدَاوِلُهَا بَيْنَ النَّاسِ. We have made people pass through different turns of history so that God would know the true believers. Have some of you bear witness to the people's deeds. God does not love the unjust. A few things regarding this ayah before I get into the discussion is that, number one, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this ayah is trying to console us by telling, or initially the Holy Prophet, the Prophet of Islam, that if you are facing difficulties, it's natural, because people that lived before you, they faced, calamities as well. If you are facing opposition, if there's an injury that has been inflicted upon you, so people before you, they also been inflicted with injuries as well. These are the times that pass through different turns in history. This is how the history goes. People before you suffered, and so therefore you will be suffering today as well. And there's nothing new about it. And if suffering comes toward you, don't expect that, because you are the chosen one, because you are the ummah which has been chosen by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you follow the deen which has been chosen by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَرَضِيتُ لَكُمُ الْإِسْلَامَ دِينًا, and in the deen عِنْدَ اللَّهِ Islam does not mean the fact that Allah has chosen this deen for you and you are the followers of this deen, that there won't be any suffering written on your behalf. No, you will definitely still get to suffer regardless of the fact that you follow this madhab. Number two, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala over here says something interesting when He says, وَلِيَعْلَمَ اللَّهُ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا, so that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would know the true believers by suffering what comes out of you. The best of you comes out. The best of the insan's abilities come out. When you put someone through pressure, difficulty, when they are tested and tried, at that point, the good and the bad of the person comes out. Speaks volumes about individuals, ability, salahiyat, qabiliyat, capability. All those things are tested when you are under the radar, when you are being tested. Because if you're not tested, if you and I are not going through any sort of struggle in our life, then the good and the bad of us will never come out. So, good and bad comes out, that tells you and I who is mu'min or who is ghayr mu'min. But here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلِيَعْلَمَ اللَّهُ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا, so that Allah would know who amongst you is, amongst those who are mu'mineen. Does really Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala need to test to figure out which one of us is a true believer and which one of us is not a true believer? No. كَانَ اللَّهُ عَلِيمًا حَكِيمًا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Alim, He's Hakim. يَعْلَمُ مَا فِي الصُّدُورِ, He knows what's inside the hearts and the sudur of mankind. So Allah does not really need, this does not increase one bit in the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Here by saying, وَلِيَعْلَمَ اللَّهُ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا, it basically refers to you and I. That you and I recognize people in our surrounding who are the true believers and who are not the true believers. With that said, it says, وَيَتَّخِذَ مِنْكُمْ شُهَدَاءَ, and amongst those true believers have some of you bear witness to the people's deeds, meaning you and I are going to be the witness over the deeds of the people. And of course, لَا يُحِبُّ الظَّالِمِينَ, Allah does not love those who are the unjust and zalimin. We just went past the event of Arba'in, and alhamdulillah, many of our mu'mineen community members had the ability to perform the ziyarat of Sayyid al-Shuhada, Imam Hussein ibn Ali, alayhi
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad.
And they were there in person to do that ziyarat, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the tawfiq, inshallah, in the years to come, to also be able to perform the sacred ziyarat of Sayyid al-Shuhada on the day of Arba'in. As it is a recommendation of our 11th Imam, Imam Hassan Yasri, alayhi salatu wasalam, mentioned khisal al-mu'min khams, that the attributes and the khisal and the sifat of mu'min are 5 things. Salatul khamseen. Number 1 is that a mu'min is someone who prays 51 rak'at in day and night. At-takhattum bil-yameen, mu'min is someone who wears a ring on the right hand. Ta'firul jabeen, mu'min is amongst those who places his forehead on the khaf. And then also ziyaratul arba'in, ziyarat of Sayyid al-Shuhada on the day of Arba'in, or the 40th of his martyrdom. Wa bismillah, bil-jahr bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, and reciting bismillah out loud in your salah. These are the 5 things that Imam mentions as mustahabbat. See, none of these are wajib. You don't have to pray 51 rakat. In fact, I don't think many of us, some of you inshallah do, I don't. You pray 51 rak'at in the daytime. You want the 17 rak'at of your wajib, 11 on top of that your salatul layl, and the remaining 23, if my math is correct, are the nawafil that we have on the daily basis. God bless you if you're able to pray 51 rak'at, you're fulfilling that khaslat of a mu'min mentioned by our 11th Imam. Number 2, Imam says, but takhattum bil yameen, my rings are in the car, I'm not wearing today. But mu'min, one of the nishani of mu'min is that he wears a ring on his right hand. And ta'firul jabeen, mu'min is someone who places his forehead on the ground. Right? There's a khasiyat of ground because we are created from the kha, and we place our forehead, the topmost part of our body, which is the most respected part of the body, onto what? Onto the ground, showing utmost humility and humbleness in front of our Creator, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Number 4, Imam says, ziyaratul arba'in, one of the khisal of a mu'min is that he performs the ziyarat of Sayyid al-Shuhada on the 40th day after the martyrdom of Imam Hussein. And of course, it is a movement that we see. That first year after the martyrdom of Imam Hussein, there were maybe, few people that visited the grave of Imam. Just the family members. Jabir along with his companion, and just a few family members that came back. Whatever was remaining of the qafilah, they were the ones, probably not even reaching 100 people that visited the grave of Sayyid al-Shuhada. And today, according to some of the census, there is 22 million people this year alone visited the grave of Imam Hussein on the 40th, on the day of Arba'in. So again, many of us are fulfilling that khaslat, or that attribute that 11th Imam has asked us to do, to go ahead and not neglect the ziyarat of Arba'in. Why do we go for the ziyarat? Primarily, the reason is you get closer to the vicinity of the place where this tragedy took place. And all it does, it brings you closer and closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You're not there to worship Imam, you're there to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through the tawassul of Sayyid al-Shuhada. And lastly, Imam said that وَالْجَهْرُ بِسْمِ اللَّهِ الرَّحْمَنِ الرَّحِيمِ, one of the signs of a mu'min is that he recites Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim out loud. I'm sure the speaker who was here must have highlighted these things, as usually speakers normally do highlight. This hadith of our Imam counts amongst the 5 things that are recommended. See, the Imam did not mention any of these things as wajib. Praying 51 rakat is not wajib, only 17 is wajib. Placing your forehead on khak is not wajib. You can place it on other things upon which placing the forehead is permissible, as long as they're not edible, or as long as those things are not something that you wear. Aside from that, things upon which that grow from the ground, you can place your forehead as far as the sajda is concerned. Number 3, takhattum bil yameen. It's not wajib to wear a ring, but it is recommended. Number 4, Imam says ziyarat. Many of us could not go. We perform the ziyarat from far distance. You recited the ziyarat standing over here, and you sent your salutations to Imam. So we couldn't go. So that is again another wajib that Imam is mentioning. Lastly, you don't have to recite Bismillah out loud. It is only being recommended. What Imam is telling us in this hadith, that Kamal Islam is in performance of your wajibat, and Kamal Iman is in performance of mustahabbat. So along with the Islam that you have, that you do your wajibat, give irtiqa to your beliefs and give height to your understanding by performing these mustahabbat as well, which will take you to the level of taqwa and make you true muttaqeen. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Allah.
This ayat that I recited, just so that we have justified reading this ayat as well, is Surah Imran 140 The background of this ayat is consoling the hearts of Muslimin after the battle of Uhud. إِن يَمْسَسْكُمْ قَرْحٌ فَقَدْ مَسَّتْ قَوْمٌ. That if you are facing injuries after the battle of Uhud, indeed, people that lived before you, they faced injuries and oppression and difficulties as well. So it was consoling the hearts of the Muslims after the battle of Uhud. Of course, initially in the battle of Uhud, Muslimin were victorious, they were winning, and they had driven the mushrikeen away. But of course, some 50 shooters who were placed meticulously by Rasulullah on top of the mountain, they were told to stay and keep their position until the last moment. They saw that the enemy was fleeing, they were running away, and the others will get to Mal Ghanimat before us, and we will not get anything in return. So they left their position. They came down to go ahead and pick up Mal Ghanimat as the enemy was running away. This is where the enemy got the position. Leader of them was Khalid ibn Walid, who turned around, came back from the backside, and attacked the Muslimin. So they were caught in between. They were chasing after the mushrikeen, and then some of the mushrikeen came around the mountain, and then started running after them. And that really cost them a great deal. Many of the lives were lost at that time. But of course, this is where the ayat comes down, tells them, consoling the hearts of the Muslim after the battle of Uhud, that if you suffered some today, there's nothing new. In people before you have also suffered. This is one way of consoling people. When you see someone, or when counselors speak to those who are going through difficulty, when psychiatrists speak to people going through difficulty, one of the methods that they adopt is the method of mithal and tamthil. They give tamthil. They say, well, this has happened to others as well. Some other people are suffering more than you are suffering. So in order to not diminish or undermine their difficulty, but to highlight that no, there are more problems that people are suffering. Yours is minute in comparison to that, and therefore it might lead to them, their heart being consoled regarding that. So that is, if you suffer, your enemies also suffered. If you didn't come out victorious today, your enemies were also not victorious yesterday in the battle of Badr. Therefore, show forbearance in front of difficult times. Whenever difficulty comes upon you, you should not just go ahead and say, well, that's it. I'm not going to follow this deen anymore, and this difficulty has taken everything from me, and why even bother? No, this is where the real test lies. When you're tested, when you're put through trials, only the good should come out of you, and sometimes the bad of the people comes out as well. There are always changes taking place in people and places around us. As I said, تِلْكَ الْأَيَّامُ نُدَاوِلُهَا. Don't think that the current situation that you and I are in, if it's such a bad situation, for example, that it will always remain this way. This ayat is one of the hopeful ayat of Quran, giving you hope that not always you will be in this sorry state of suffering. There will be turnaround. Sometimes some other people will be suffering, sometimes you will be at ease. And then opposite of that, and vice versa at other times. So don't think that today, because suffering has engulfed you, surrounded you, now there's nothing out of it and you're never going to be able to make out of it. No, you will make out of it tomorrow. This is how Allah has designed this whole universe. And so the ayat says, تِلْكَ الْأَيَّامُ نُدَاوِلُهَا بَيْنَ النَّاسِ. So what I wanted to discuss here, I've already taken 15-20 minutes of your time, is in regards to our duties, and by giving example of two of the prominent Anbiya who suffered in their time, and how they dealt with the suffering that they had. Now, sometimes someone Nabi is Nabi because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created them as Nabi. No, they earned the status of Nubuwwat. So they had to show something from them, their forbearance, their patience that led them to be a Nabi and chosen by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So individually, sometimes we are poor or we are rich. We're happy or we are sad. We're healthy or we are sick. Aside from these changes, which always happen. Sometimes their business is doing good, so they're happy and they're rich. Sometimes the business goes down, so they're not so happy. And I guess the richness has to do with happiness, and the sadness has to do with poverty. Sometimes you're healthy, and sometimes you get sick. And again, the sadness has to do with something with your sickness, and joy has to do with your being healthy, alhamdulillah. So all of these are the changes that are individual changes that happen all the time. You and I go through these changes throughout our life. Multiple times within 1 year, you might see up and down and the ebbs and flows in your life. Aside from these changes, when you were kids, then adults, and then elderly, these changes serve as a constant reminder that there is someone who's running all the affairs, who has complete control over my life and as well as this universe. It's not in my hand to always remain in my shabab. Oh Allah, I want to always remain, in my youth years. No, that is not going to happen. Regardless of how much you try and what cream you apply and what medicines you take, you may prolong a few years in your life, but whatever is written for you, that is written for you, and you will gradually be aging. So might as well age gracefully than to go ahead and try these things to keep your aging process and delaying your aging process. Amir al-Mu'mineen, Imam al-Muttaqeen, Ali ibn Abi Talib, عرفت الله بفسخ العزائم ونقض الهمم. Through revoking of determinations and the breaking of intentions, عرفت الله. How did I recognize Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? This is Ali, who has the absolute ma'rifat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But he's telling us that how should you recognize it? There's nothing else that is telling you the ma'rifat or giving you the ma'rifat of Allah. This book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the teachings of the Prophet and the teachings of Ahl-e-Bait Allah, if they are not enough for the ma'rifat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then this should be enough for your ma'rifat and the recognition of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What did he say? He says, عرفت الله بفسخ العزائم ونقض الهمم. I recognize Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when my determinations, fasq al-azaim, they were, revoked. When my intentions were changed. When my himam, that was changed. Through that I realized, no, there's someone else who's running all the affairs. It's not all in my hand. Some of it is in my hand, I can do only to an extent, but then everything else is in the hand of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's at individually. Individually, you face these changes. Individually, you go through the process of these difficulties that come about, whether sickness or health, whether poor or being rich, or other things that you can imagine. Number two, socially, we see the condition of nations change in front of our eyes. Those of you, especially those who are plus 60, for example, you have seen many nations make and break. Many nations, seeking their azadi and freedom, they became free, and some of them being captured, and all of this is, of course, a history lesson for us. If you haven't seen it, you can always study about it as well. So sometimes a nation rules over us, a noble family has authority over us, sometimes immoral believers are in the powers, sometimes the immoral people, they are in power. Sometimes unbelievers are in power. All these are to let us ponder and think. There are lessons for us to learn from it, that who should we want as our leader and who should we have as our authority over us. There are many things that has to do with our own actions as far as who gets to rule us and who gets to lead us. When night comes, we realize the importance of the day. The existence of evil people distinguishes the presence of good people. If immoral people aren't in power sometimes, like the Umayyads and the Abbasids, we won't understand the leadership of the noble people of Ahl-e-Bait, alayhi wassalatu wassalam.